The highest of the Kabbalistic worlds in the Yod, He, Vav, He formula is naturally the Yod. Yod in Hebrew is that small little flame-like character. Iota in Greek. It's just a small dot, or a yod, or a yot. It is the basic Hebrew letter. It's just a small flame. Blow on the Yod, and it creates all the other Hebrew letters. Yod means hand in Hebrew. Literally, the creative hand of God. Yod is the life force itself. It's truly our true identity. In a very real way, all of the other Kabbalistic worlds, all of the other parts of the soul are just expressions, lower vibratory expressions of the life force itself, the Yod. In the tarot, it's represented by the suit of wands.
Swords are air, pentacles are earth, cups are water, wands are fire. Because the wand is always a living wand. There are little green leaves from it. It represents the backbone and the pathway of that mind essence that the Hindus call Kundalini. This relates to some of those spiritual, alchemical processes that bring magic and regeneration and creativity up into the spiritual level of the head.
Now the wand is a tool or a symbol that symbolizes numinosity and its connection with the fire element. Fire has that magical qualities about it, literal fire, because it's transformative. It changes. Anything that goes into fire changes its form. It's powerful. It has both a constructive and a destructive quality to it. You can cook with it. We also can burn down a city with it. Fire is a very powerful force.
Fire has many interesting qualities, including that of breaking things down into their essential elements. Fire is destructive to us on the material plane, but fire is inspirational on the other planes.
This is one of my favorite wands. I got it at a toy store, probably for about $5.95 or something like that. And it's a perfect wand. You can see bubbles, and it's cylindrical, and it's magical. And it's numinous. And the numenon is a word that I like to use to describe what wands and magic and fire are all about. And that is as I understand it, it's that experience in the psyche where you just feel the magical. It's like you're overwhelmed, say, by a sunset or a synchronicity or some kind of creative process, and your whole psyche is just filled with energy. We've all felt it at various times. Some people use psychedelic drugs to experience the noumena.
The magician card, the magician trump card, we see the magician standing behind his table, and he has the wand in his hand, pointed up, as if to draw down fire from heaven. This is reminiscent of the myth of Prometheus, the creator of mankind, that literally brought down fire from heaven in a hollow tube. In the marvelous film, The English Patient, there's the line, "The heart is an organ of fire." And in a very real sense, the element of fire, the initiatory level that corresponds to the element of fire, is not the heart, but the spark that drives the heart of the universe. It's the spark of consciousness that's at the heart and soul of the universe.
As long as you're in manifestation, something has to sustain it. The network of that sustenance has been called the etheric network, the force, the matrix, many, many different names. But this life force and this network through which it moves is everywhere equally present.
Fire as a symbol has multiple octaves of meaning. It has at once a psychological application, but also a physical, emotional, and spiritual application. One octave of fire has to do with the primal life force itself. This aspect of the fire element is revered and worshipped in many of the most esoterically accomplished ancient cultures. It is sometimes also referred to as chi, prana, kundalini.
Years ago, I belonged to an initiatory society that would send out monographs each week, and I'd study the monographs, and it was a marvelous experience. And in one of those monographs, it encouraged us to prick our finger and draw a small amount of blood and look at the blood under the microscope while it was still alive. And when you look at that blood cell, you see pumping in the very center of it, like a little heartbeat that showed that it was alive. And then we were told that the power that drives that little cell is the same spark, the same fire that is responsible for our own heartbeat. The cell, as it were, a microcosm of the heart's macrocosm.
What's called life force, and it's been given many, many different names in many systems, is the fact that the great cosmic biggie, God, is in incarnation. When we look out in the night sky, even in this physical, dense life that we live, we can see physical asteroids and stars and planets. God is in manifestation. Now, in order to sustain that manifestation, there has to be the circulation of God's life through every part of that network. Whether we're talking about higher dimensions, other dimensions, the afterlife, whatever that is according to your culture, our bodies, our emotions, down to the quantum foam. As long as you're in manifestation, something has to sustain it. The universe is a living being. It's the breathing, manifested body of God. It's the instrument through which the great cosmic biggie expresses and works. And there is life in everything at every level. There's no such thing as inanimate substance. And part of metaphysical teaching, using that term correctly, has to do with understanding those relationships, understanding those interactions. From the subatomic particle to our acupuncture system, to the network of the planet itself, to that invisible force that holds planets in relationship to their sun. It's that invisible network, that body of God through which the life of God, like blood, flows and sustains.
This mysterious life force is what we share with all living things. It is the invisible flow that connects the macro with the micro, the above with the below.
There are many, many models for understanding the subtle dimension of the human organism. And it's not helped by the fact that our current science was specifically drawn up to exclude that from reality. You know, it's one of the problems. No, you can't make sense of it when your entire worldview is designed to exclude it. But in magical logics, the idea is that we all have a body of energy as well as a body of matter. That body of energy is the basis of the personality. A lot of what magic is about manipulating this subtle energy, the stuff that surrounds us all the time. Those who watch the Star Wars movies know instantly what I'm talking about, because George Lucas took a very, very traditional idea when he invented the Force that his Jedi Knights use.
There are different levels at which energy can be accumulated, stored, and released. For instance, when we look at the standing stones in Europe manipulating the acupuncture lines within the earth, there are certain places, some of those stone circles, where that energy that normally moves in a line, you can harness that, spin it in the circle, build up a charge, and then release it through a particular stone for a particular purpose. Well, a lot of these traditions can do this with sexual energy, emotional energy, mental energy.
In the Golden Dawn, at various points in ritual work, you have energy directed at certain subtle centers in the body. And it's very deliberate. It's done with rods and working tools. In the neophyte grade, which is the first initiation, of course, the three primary initiators join their wands in a triangle above the head to awaken the crown center above the top of the head. To awaken that into operation, start the process whereby the initiate is going to start becoming aware of his higher spiritual nature. And then at different points throughout the initiation, throughout the process of initiation, the long and winding road, various other centers are stimulated to the goal that eventually, when you get to the end of the process, your whole subtle body is lit up like a Christmas tree. You've got full contact with all the energies you want to work with. And you can do the same thing to other people.
Now, this is being studied by acupuncture meridians, by the ley lines of the earth, by feng shui, by Carillion photography, which is not really photography of the aura. It is the path that life energy takes. What science is beginning to discover is the frequency of it, or the quality of it, that's closest to this physical, dense world that we live in. When you cut away a part of a leaf, that matrix or network of light that you see is very brilliant for a while, but it will fade over time. and diminish. So it is with the human being. This is one possibility of the lost limb effect on amputees. The doctors will tell you that when you sever a limb, you've got sounding nerve endings that are still feeding information to the brain. And that's certainly true. But it could also be that just because the physical part is gone, the energy network that sustains it is still there for a while. And how long that stays in that shape depends on the person's life energy, vital force, how long that circulation can be sustained. And most creatures are aware of this network and this life force. Anyone that's ever owned a cat will watch the cat look at something that they can't see, running around on the floor in the air. Dogs as well. It's just now that our human technology is getting to the point where we can record some of this phenomena.
Since an initiation in a magical order is very much focused in enabling people to work with the Force, to learn certain magical techniques and so on, one of the things you have to do is get the energetic body cleaned. I mean, our energy bodies, especially in a culture like this one, are very, very grubby. It's like we never learned how to bathe. And so we go around covered with crud. And an important start, before you can do much of anything else, give them a bath. And so that's a lot of what goes on in the energetic dimensions of initiations. Now, this is not just the case in magical lodges. I found it very much the case in fraternal lodges, except nobody understands that that's what they're doing. They've got these powerful symbols that everybody's concentrating on that have very predictable results, and if you know your magical stuff, it's a matter of, oh yeah, that makes sense. But the people who are actually doing it today, here and now in modern America, they have no exposure to that. They know that the rituals are very important. They know that you have to do them just so, and that they're very exciting, and they'll devote huge amounts of energy to something they don't understand. And they often get very good results. Because TSW, this stuff works. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. Because it's not purely psychological in nature. It relates to psychology, but it relates to a whole range of aspects of human experience. And a number of those aspects are as objective as rock. That's the thing that our modern science won't absorb, because it can't, because it would overthrow the basic structure of reality that we're all comfortable in, and then we're out twisting in the void.
There is a resonance within the earth itself, which is termed the Schumann resonance. And ancient temples, for instance, some of the Greek healing temples, were built over essentially ley lines in the earth, or acupuncture lines within the earth itself. And the architecture of the temple was designed to enhance the natural properties of the energy currents within the earth itself. Again, what the Chinese would call feng shui. And so if a person was ill, it meant that their organs, their nerve plexes, the Easterners would call these chakras, these energy centers. The chakras are really places of energy where a lot of lines of acupuncture lines come together. There are actually physical nerve plexes that you can see on an anatomy chart. The solar plexus, the heart area is called the cardiac plexus, and these all correspond. So if you were ill it meant that you were out of balance. And so you would go into one of these healing temples where the architecture accentuated the natural healing currents of the earth, and it would bring your organs and energy centers and chakras, pick your term, into harmony with the Schumann resonance of the earth. If you vibrated in harmony with the earth, you were in balance, you were in health.
The chakras allow us to participate in the energetic realms, receiving and recycling life force on one register, consciousness of various types on higher registers. The invisible life force is one aspect of the symbol of fire. The universal fire also manifests on another octave by animating and organizing consciousness. Fire of air, or fire on the mental plane, represents the higher mind functions like creativity, invention, imagination, and gnosis. Gnosis, for those not familiar with the term, is a form of unexplainable knowing, often referred to by the umbrella term intuition.
In the hierarchy that the ancients would do it, they would start with the highest of the elements, which would be fire, which would correspond, in modern psychology to the intuitive function. More thinking intuition than feeling intuition. But there's two kinds of intuition. There's also a water, which would be the next level going down the elemental food chain. Water would be associated with the feeling function, the emotional function. Then one step below that would be thinking. Okay, thinking's pretty low, and that would be air. Air would be associated with the thinking function, and finally, the lowest of all the elementals would simply be the earth. It would simply be the physical manifest world, and that would be associated with the body or the sensation, the sensate function. Usually, if you're high in the sensation, you're high in earth, you're pretty low in intuition, in fire. Okay, they're opposites. My favorite poetry professor, who is a high intuitive, this is the type of person that, can just wax poetic on Shakespeare, but's wearing two different color socks, and they're the absent-minded professor type. Or the person that, always is forgetting their keys or gets lost getting home, much like myself, but is still at the same time processing the future in the present. The intuitive thinks in leaps and hunches. So the intuitive will just turn around and make a statement that will be remarkably accurate, but will not be rationally provable, because he doesn't, like a thinking type, take logical steps. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to this sequentially, in the way the intuitive thinks. The appreciation for the intuitive has been lost in Western culture for a long, long time, if it ever was appreciated. And I don't know enough about the ancient world to know. But of the four functions, the intuitive type, who really operates on hunches, on inklings, very close to the unconscious in a way, feels patterns. I think the artists and creative people typically tend to be thinking intuitives or feeling intuitives.
The fire of mind can be seen in the moments of creativity, of novelty, of imagination. Visualization is a concrete application of this mysterious ability we all possess, a product of the ever-shifting, ever-elusive fire of mind.
The fourth level, the higher mind. And it's the world of ideas, not just the common perceptions of the lower mind, and the working things out. But this is the higher creative mind, if you will. This is abstract thought. This is not just the repetition and the strategizing and the manipulation of just making your way in the world. This is making the world.
The higher mind is associated with the creative function, with inspiration and innovation. Higher than the mechanical everyday mind of ego and opinion, this higher center of original thought brings its own rewards for learning to access it and shift our point of view here when appropriate. The creative fire, visionary states, imagination itself are all said to be associated with the fire aspect of consciousness.
We have a lot of very interesting characters in mythologies around the world about this particular level, and they are the teacher gods. These are the gods that have brought to humanity architecture, writing, animal husbandry, venology, beer making. In fact, there's even, I think it's one of the Mediterranean myths that has, one of the teacher gods even brings the use of makeup. I thought, that's great, we all need to know that. So you have these teacher gods. You've got Hermes, and you've got Thoth, and you've got Quetzalcoatl, and you've got Dagon in the Mesopotamian stories. And almost every mythic system that you go to, there is somebody who came from somewhere else, off in the heavens, and brought the people what they needed to know to improve their lives. Prometheus was another one who brought a very valuable gift to humanity, because until that time we were sitting around in dark caves at night. Everybody had to go to bed when the sun went down because what could you do? It was dark. Prometheus saw this and said, these people need a social life. So he brought down fire from heaven, and then we had candlelight dinners and barbecue, and life got better.
Fire is a very powerful force, and then there is imaginal fire that exists in imagination.
A lot of educators and people who work with young people have noticed that they don't have imaginations like we who are somewhat older do.
This is what will is. Will is the inner fire channeled to create.
Now, a lot of young people today are being raised pretty much just on television and on the internet, and they aren't doing much reading. They aren't getting exposed to and having to work within the hot mediums of reading or of writing, of coming up with something.
It's a channel for power, basically. Remember, power I define as the ability to do or create things.
You might think, well, so what if people aren't being as creative? You know, we're still getting a lot of things done. You know, the world is massively more creative, as we've talked about before, as far as inventions and science and technology. Absolutely, yes, a lot is happening. However, the scary part, if you want to buy into some of the esoteric lore about this, is that the next battle for the soul of humanity is going to take place on the mental planes, and the battle has already started.
And will is like the fire element, which is associated with intuition, more thinking intuition than feeling intuition, more visualization. Thinking intuition is really the realm of visualizing, intention, and will.
And if you have a whole bunch of humans who don't know how to think, who do not have critical thinking skills, who cannot analyze situations and see the truth, and see where they are being manipulated by other people who are thinking, then it could get pretty ugly. So to me, the value of the initiatory step of working with the creative mind, working with the higher mind, is that it is not only an essential step for the individual along the path of initiation, but I tend to think it is essential for humanity. And the more of us who can foster our own ability to think creatively and to be pattern makers and to bring in new ideas and to translate them for the world, then the more we can begin to offer education on all different levels to people on all different levels, then frankly, how's it going to hurt if everybody is smarter and happier?
The fire of imagination is closely related to the ability to manifest. It is in the arena of the imagination that our goals are brought into finer and finer detail until it is inevitable that they are manifest.
I had the opportunity to work with somebody who was using the secret, the principle, and was saying that this person, or they said that they had a vision that they wanted to accomplish. And I asked them, and they said, well, I want to be involved in movies. I want to be actually an anchor person on television and then be involved in movies. And I said, so what do you see? And she said, well, I see being an anchor person. And I said, I know, but that's vague. What do you see? And she says, well, I see myself working for a major network. I said, what network? And she goes, I don't know. I said, what do you see? And we had to narrow it down. I said, what do you see? How do you dress? What does your hair look like? What's your makeup look like? What's the topic you're talking about? Do you have men and women on the other side? Are you by yourself? Do you have two women, two men, women? What's the setting? What's the message? Who's it going to? And I said, and how many years are you into your career, and how far into the future is this? And I started asking her questions. And as we did, we started getting clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer on what we were wanting to create, or what she was going to create. She started out with a nebulous statement, I want to be an anchor person. When we got through, she got really clear that she really wanted to be a star at doing this. And I always say, just like in astronomy, there are stars in the universe that shine and radiate light and give life. And there's nebula, which is gas and dust that's not quite put together. People, when they're using a secret, if they really want to shine and they really want to create something, they really want to manifest, it's crucial for them to get really, truly clear. In addition to them lining with their values, but to really, truly get clear on detail. Because the master is the one who focuses on ever finer detail. And whoever has the most detail is the ones that takes the matter out of the universe and creates with it. So just like with this woman, when we got really crystal clear, she got tears to her eyes. She saw it. She felt present with it. And the master is the one who focuses on ever finer detail until they become so present with their vision that they don't feel that it's in the future, they feel that it's now. And then they feel that they're, in a sense, present with it and it's live. And I always say, when there's an old affirmation I've used, it's sort of theological, I'm the vision, God's the power, we're the team. If I am accountable for my vision, it's congruent with my values, and I hold it in my mind with such detail that I'm in the middle of it, living it in the present, I watch people, places, things, ideas, and events come into my life almost immediately.
A good indication that something might be one's will is what we're attracted to, what we're fascinated with, what we love, the type of work that we do that's a joy to do rather than a burden. As Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss.
The aspect of the symbol of fire that applies to the emotional body represents our attractions and affinities, our passions and fascinations, and even the values we most closely resonate with.
So I don't go by what people say they want. I go by what their life demonstrates they want. Because their life demonstration speaks louder than their words. And if you look at how they fill their space, how they spend their time, how they spend their energy, how they spend their money, where they're most organized and ordered, where they're most disciplined, focused, and reliable, what they think about most, what they visualize and dream about most, what they internally converse with themselves about most, what they want to bring conversations with others to most, what they emotionally open up to most, what their goals are, and what they're most inspired by. I'm more intrigued by that because that's more authentic than what they say. I've yet to find somebody who knew their real values, unless we went probing and going and exploring, and then there was usually an eye-opening. Because most people subordinate themselves to outside authority and inject the values of other people in their life. It is not wise to live in the shadows of people. It's wise to stand on the shoulders of great giants. And what people do is they live in shadows. They don't even know it. And any area of our life we don't empower, we're automatically subordinate to outside power. And we're trying to live somebody we're not. And this creates frustrations and fantasies within our lives and around our lives, which then self-defeats and then makes us feel like we can't get our dreams. I believe the secret is there to remind people that they can, but they just need to make sure that they set congruent objectives while they do. And when they do, amazing things come out of their life. People come up to me and say, well, John, how do I stay focused? I said, if your goals are matching your highest values, you don't have to ask that question. Nobody has to get me to be focused. Nobody has to be reminded me and say, oh, it's time to get up and do what you do. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I know what my dreams are. And I feel blessed by it. And fulfillment is directly proportionate to that. So if you're not feeling that way, and you're hearing yourself saying should, I'm supposed to, I'm have to, you're subordinating yourself and minimizing yourself to others, then just realize you're not going to have your magnificence doing that. You have to be willing to embrace your magnificence, discover what's truly important to you, and realize no two people have the same value system in the world. And no two people are designed to. If any two are exactly the same, one's not necessary. And so I think that by acknowledging inside you that you have it inside, and don't question it, you know you have it, and be willing to dig inside and look at what's truly honest to you. And as you set goals, if you're getting feedback that's not working, go back and refine the goals until you get tears in the eyes, because when you get tears in the eyes, you know you found it. And if you have to ask the question, it's not it. Because when you know what it is, you don't have to ask the question. You're certain about what your destiny is. And the word manifestation, I believe the word mani or manu or manna or many derivatives has double meaning. It means handedness, and it also means mind. There is in philosophy, there's a thing called the theoretical and the practical. The theoretical was an abstract idea. The practical was putting the idea now into action, and usually done with the hands. That's why the word chiropractic means hand, done with the hands. So what happens, manifestation means to take an idea and to put it into our hands, to create, to mold into manifestation, into creation. And so that means that we are going to be involved in acting. So it's not just holding the image, it's also taking an action and having strategies.
Will is channeled through the imagination, focused through the emotional and mental planes, and manifested on the physical plane. This involves not only the ability to distinguish our true will from externally injected, learned or programmed values, but also the ability to use the other bodies to plan and execute the steps necessary to make our vision a reality.
Will is an interesting concept. We could say that suns and planets and satellites each have a will, and that will is their orbit. So too, each individual has his or her own place in the universe, a reason for being here, the same way a planet has a reason for being here, or a sun, or a satellite. That reason is our will. And as long as we are doing our will, doing what we are here to do, we have the same momentum of all of the rest of our celestial neighbors behind us. When we are doing our will, we are effortlessly going through the universe. When we are not doing our will, we are like a planet knocked out of orbit, careening into other planets who are blissfully doing their will, blissfully staying inside their orbit.
Fire of fire, the highest aspect or highest octave of the fire symbol, represents what is known as our thelemic will. When our lower bodies are under control, aligned under will, we begin to catch glimpses of our true place in the universe, our unique path through the cosmos.
Most people have not yet reached the place where their personality is integrated. It's like those three horses pulling the chariot, but they're all going in different directions. What the physical body wants, what the emotions want, and what the mind wants are not always the same thing at all. You know, you step out of the shower one night and you take a look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I've got to go on a diet. And you make that decision. But then the next day, when the spaghetti passes you by, a different part of you makes a different decision. Because what the emotions want, and what the mind wants, and what the physical body wants, don't always match. So again, part of the work is getting all three bodies to work together, to have a consensus, or at least to have a designated leader. In some life situations, you might designate the mind to make the decision. In other situations, it might be the physical that needs to make the decision. The point is conscious choice and delegating what point of will you go with.
It's not always easy to know what our will is, because most of us are existing in a plane of consciousness whereby we attempt to know everything with our intellect. Will is something you do. Will is something you are. Therefore, until a certain level of illumination is achieved, doing one's will can be a hit or miss affair.
Now, once you get past that, once you recognize that each level has its own point of will, the will of the physical body, the will of the emotions, the will of the mind, then once you integrate those, you have to make that the Grail chalice, receptive to the higher spiritual will, where again you don't throw away the personal will, you align it with that higher will, and your will becomes a harmonic at a lower level of that will of God. And you take that in and you add your own voice to it. Not my will, Father, but thine. And it's not that you're throwing away your will and becoming a robot. You are choosing that greater will because it makes sense, because it includes the best for all life. And so you choose that and say, I believe in this, I think this, I know this, and I'm going to do this here in this time and space. And so it's the level of will which you choose at any moment. The spiritual candidate is choosing that higher will, making that higher will their own, and acting upon that will within the world to the best of their ability.
Will is not willpower as we understand it. Willpower suggests that we're forcing something that is going a way that we don't want it to go, so our willpower goes in to change it. This type of will is actually our natural flow, our natural orbit. It's not that we're trying to grit our teeth and change something in and of ourselves. We're trying to find out who we are and what we are here to do. It's something that your mind can't come to a conscious decision, oh, it's my will to do this or that. It's not a case of your emotion coming to the conclusion, well, I feel I want to do this. It's greater than both of those. It's something that you do because it's far easier to do it than to not do it. That's your orbit. And once you're in that groove, you are doing your will. Then your body, then your mind, then your emotion all act in concord. And you do your will, you express yourself, and literally turn yourself into a sun that knows its place in the universe and radiates that light to the rest of the universe.
This is in the tarot, it's the magician. It's the classic archetype of the magus, the magician. What the magician does is summons or finds ways of calling forth or channeling that inner fire, that inner thinking intuition, the ability to visualize our ends or our goals or our desires, hold them in the mind, and then take that picture that we image in our mind and send it forth in an intended direction. Here, now this card here, this is the Four of Fire, the Four of Wands. Those magic wands are now symbolized and brought into the tarot as symbols of this channeled fire. Okay. In this expression, there's 4 of them, 2 and 2. Remember that number, quaternity? We loved it. This is the 4 in the element of fire, creating things, power. And those buds on the top are talking about potential, essentially. They are, they're the life in potentia. They are the seed form. They are, they are what will come into fruition through the actualization of this force of will. So the thing is, they are process things. They set things into they're like supergrow. They're like supergrow or something like that. They powerful fertilizer that using the will can all of a sudden grow things very, very quickly. It's really what may separate us from, quote, the animals or the lower life forms, is that ability to magically channel will. Harry Potter is just the emergence, the overdue reemergence of this fantastic archetype into collective imagination of youth.
The wand acts much like a conductor's wand. It provides a standard which leads and guides the constituents. At a critical moment, the wand unifies the will, the mind, the emotions, and the body. All are in alignment and work in unison to send the will of the magician into the manifest world.
I think the future, there's so much that can be accomplished with the intentionality of will to stop wars, to get people to go to a meeting that stops wars, to get yourself to change your diet, okay, or to imagine yourself finding the person of your dreams that you haven't seen yet in your manifest life.
There's a reason that Karl Marx's quote that religion is the opiate of the people has credence still today. And that is that rulers have always known that you have to keep the masses suppressed. The mystery schools are working on exactly the opposite. They're trying to take the individual out of that mass mentality up into individuation and then up into a group mind, a group consciousness, if you will, that takes into account all of humanity. So to keep people unthinking, to keep people unambitious, then keeps them controlled and is Oh, too often the way the world has been.
I say let neither pleasure nor pain interfere with the pursuit of purpose. And passions are avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, and purpose is transcending both of those. It's like transcendent to good and evil, transcendent to pleasure and pain. I call it the higher mind or the higher self. It's called in Christianity the Christ. It is called in Mithraic teachings, or Zoroastrian teachings, the Mithra. It's called in the Mayan teachings Quetzalcoatl. It's got different names, Inti in the Peruvian. It's called Horus in Egyptian. It just goes around everywhere. But I call it the higher self or the higher-minded self. And this higher-minded self, when it is untainted by the elusive sensory, value-projected sensory experiences, the selective awareness of that, it, in a state of equilibrium, in equity, not inequity, it reveals purpose and meaning. And it's not just limited meanings that we give it from our sensory realities and make God in our own image. It's actually an ordained expression and graced, inspired, purposeful calling and vision that's revealed to people when the mortal side of us or mortal part of us is released. And when we are attuning to our senses and projecting our values onto things and polarizing things, good and bad and right and wrong, and kind of a moral issue, which is a very mortal state, we are passionful, not purposeful. And a person with ambition and mission or purpose is somebody who has integrated their two sides. The alchemic Solar and Luna has united, and they're now inspired and are called from inside instead of being reacting from the outside. The philosopher said, I'd rather have the whole world against me than my own soul. But the soul calls us to a purpose that we can see vividly, lucidly, and hear in a beautifully articulate manner when our mind is equilibrated and equity instead of inequity. When we have double-mindedness, we can't capture this purpose. Every week in my breakthrough program, people say, well, I don't know what my purpose is. And what I find is that everyone does have in their heart a knowing of what they'd love to dedicate their lives to. But they let the primary 7 fears and guilt stop them. The fear of breaking morals and ethics by some perceived authority. And they're afraid of breaking some perceived authority's values. The fear of not knowing enough, or not having a great memory or imagination, or not being brilliant enough to do something. The fear of failing at something. The fear of not making enough money or being bankrupt or something. The other one is the fear of losing loved ones. And the other is the fear of rejection. And the other one is the fear of ill health, death, or disease. Those 7 mortal fears stop and cloud and veil the brilliance and illuminant radiance that the soul is revealing through the mind when it's in a state of equity. And we have purpose inherently in us. And I believe it is revealed visually and auditorily and kinesthetically. At least that's what I see in my program every week. Because when I remove those fears and help people remove those, out comes spontaneously purpose.
So, regardless of whether you're talking about your own self being on the path of initiation, this use of the higher creative mind may be the path out of the darkness for all of us. Sociologically, psychologically, certainly politically, because the more awareness we can bring to all the situations in our lives, the better.